Amanda Wakeley, OBE. What a pleasure to have you on the Therapy Works podcast. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's so lovely to see your sunny face.
You are a creative director, a writer, a commentator, and also a podcast host. So we both do this on the side and in the middle. You've won numerous fashion awards, including 3 British Fashion Awards.
Correct.
Do you want to add?
That
What
takes
have I
me
missed
way
out?
back. Nothing really. I mean, I suppose this is a whole new chapter for me, having spent 30 years at the helm of my eponymous fashion brand. And then in 2021, that finished. And alongside losing my brother, literally within 2 weeks of losing my business.
Gosh.
And yes, as you know, and you helped me through it, thank you very, very much. It was quite a full stop, a very sudden full stop.
Yeah. I mean, so the question I ask every guest is, what is a particular challenge you have faced or are facing? And those 2 very significant losses, the death of your brother and the end of a business that had been the sort of center of your life for decades, your work life and your home life kind of having significant loss at the same time, is a massive challenge.
It was a massive challenge. Suddenly, let's talk about my brother. A sibling loss is huge. It's, as you said to me at the time, and it really struck home, it's the longest relationship that you will ever have, most probably. And they're complex too, sibling relationships. So, let's not put cotton wool around it. And yet I was lucky enough to have 15 months with my brother, knowing what was happening, to put all that to bed, to move forward, to have a very, very special bond, that the sort of bond that we had as little kids, and sort of bring all of those memories back to life. I mean, it was a particularly cruel disease that my brother had. He had a brain tumor, and
Gosh, it's very tough.
It was very tough. Plus, he was a medic, a very, very senior medic, and so
Like your dad, wasn't your dad?
yes, and my grandfather. So it's sort of very much in the family. And so it was particularly cruel for him because he knew what was coming down the line.
One of the things that comes up for me as you're speaking is that how we grieve is very unique. And one of the big things that influences our capacity to grieve is how someone dies, and what sounds important for you in this sort of complex relationship of siblings. And often in grief, siblings are called the invisible mourners because the partners, the parents, the children get primary status, and siblings are seen kind of as an adjunct, not, a primary mourner. And I think what you're acknowledging is that for both your brother saying goodbye to you and for you living now without your brother is a major loss to grieve, which is often not seen. But what feels very powerful is that you could get as close towards the end of his life as you had been when you were children, and there had been intervening years, which I'm imagining you're saying, that weren't as close.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But it was very powerful to come together as 2 adults with the same background, and so many shared memories, and to sort of relive that and really properly reconnect as adults, because our lives had taken very, very different paths. And that's nothing to be ashamed of. I moved countries, he was a medic. I was a creative. He never really understood what I did. He always referred to me as a dressmaker. And so he never really, really got it. Actually, I think he did get it. He came to one of my fashion shows once, and, it was a big sort of London Fashion Week show. And I will never forget him and his wife and my 2 nephews there backstage, and their eyes on stalks at just everything that goes into a show.
Yeah, the logistics and the scale of it. And I guess that is often true in siblings, isn't it? Thinking about the complexity of a sibling relationship. You know, you were brought up in a family where I guess being a doctor is what gave meaning and purpose, and somehow clothes were kind of superfluous or a kind of add-on. And it took until he saw a show of yours for him to fully realize that actually this was a business and a way of being that was more than just silly clothes. I mean, maybe you can explain for yourself, what is it that people don't understand about a creative like you, that it isn't just superfluous and a sort of nice to have?
That's a really interesting question, Julia, because I post Amanda Wakeley, and you helped me in that. You referred to it as the fertile void, and I love that phrase of who am I, where am I going from here? Because I'm a worker. I didn't want to retire, and I wanted a new chapter. And it was working out what that new chapter was. And then I came to this realization on one of my many long walks.
Long walks are good places for realizations, aren't they?
They are fantastic places for realization. That I did what I did as a designer for 30 years because I wanted women to feel better. I wanted them to feel the best version of themselves. And so that was very straightforward, you know, just create the most gorgeous pieces that I could dream up. And yet, as a woman designing for women, know that they had a practicality and a purpose and a luxury and an uplifting, empowering element to them. And then I started to think, okay, what is it that drives us to wear these clothes, that drives us to clothe our naked selves and message to the rest of the world, or to ourselves indeed, you know, to quote L'Oreal, that lovely phrase, I'm worth it. You know, why do we wear cashmere? Because we love it. It feels gorgeous. Yes, some people with a trained eye can see that you're wearing cashmere, but actually you wear cashmere for yourself generally. This is a very long-winded answer, but it was trying to understand the psychology behind fashion. And years before, I'd written the outline of a book to start working this out. And then I put it aside. And then during COVID, I thought, gosh, actually, there's an element of this book. I'd done a sort of rather humorous questionnaire to help people work out who they are stylistically. And I thought, do you know what? That actually is quite an interesting framework for a podcast. It wasn't there. It wasn't the finished product. And so I was thinking and thinking, then COVID finished, you know, Charlie was very ill. My mother needed, you know, as much time with him as I could possibly help her get, you know, all of those things. Life took over again. And it wasn't until I was in this fertile void that I thought, do you know what? I love people. I'm curious. I'm really curious about what makes them tick stylistically. And then I thought, there's so many stories attached to why we wear what we wear, right from our very, very earliest memory of how clothes make us feel. And for me, it was a silly little pair of mittens that were, in my mind, they were ocelot and very exotic. They were actually probably printed rabbit, but I felt so glamorous in them, and they just elevated my little anorak and my wellies and all the rest of it. I felt just gorgeous in them, and I wore them until I literally couldn't ram my hands in them anymore. And I just thought, there's so many stories to be told here. It's sort of a sartorial desert isle of discs, really. And that's this whole next chapter is my podcast.
And finding out how we feel on the inside and how we can bridge that to what we wear on the outside, so that we kind of feel beautiful and shining, and somehow look in the mirror and feel beautiful because of what we've chosen to wear.
Absolutely.
And I bought your clothes. I bought your clothes for big events in my life. That was I mean, yeah.
Well, I remember you coming way back when, actually with Diana on some occasions.
Yes, she helped me choose the outfit I wore for the launch of Child Bereavement UK, the
Yeah.
charity I'm founder patron of. And she
Yeah.
came to the launch and she helped me choose my blue suit, which I've still got. And I can't squeeze into the skirt, but I can wear the jacket and still do.
Oh, I love that. I love that. But yes, so at times we want to feel elevated, but at times we want to feel really cocoon. And it's often a question I ask, a podcast guest, if they've been through a particularly challenging time in their life, whether it's a bereavement or whatever it is, what did they reach for during that time? Because I think it's quite enlightening.
Yeah. Can we get back to your internal world? Given that there were these two massive losses, your brother and the business ending, what were the things that were particularly challenging about both of them? But also, I think it's interesting for people to hear multiple losses at the same time, because I think that can really intensify one's difficulty.
Well, I mean, talking about multiple losses, I remember, it was only 6 months previously that I'd lost my 15-and-a-half-year-old Labrador, who'd been my absolute little
Your
soulmate.
child,
I mean,
yeah.
yes, I know that sounds rather pathetic to
It
say,
doesn't.
but I don't have children, and she was absolutely family, and she had a sixth sense about her in an extraordinary way that not all dogs do. So I really did have multiple losses, and
That's
I
huge.
suppose so yes, I'm lucky enough to have a wonderful partner and soulmate in my life, thank God. But losing my business of 30 years, which was to a degree my baby,
And your
you know,
identity.
and my identity. And I remember waking up the day after I'd stepped away, and it was like, okay, so who am I today? But actually, in a way, it wasn't. It was because Charlie had gone and all that. There was so much. I felt like a rabbit in the headlights. I was completely and utterly frozen. Yeah. And that was when I reached out to you, because I couldn't walk forwards, backwards, sideways. I was absolutely frozen.
And that feeling of chill is, I don't think people who haven't experienced realized how it's scary, because you're just not yourself. You can't call on the you that you know. There's no kind of heart. You just feel this loss of connection with yourself and life and energy and the life force and curiosity. So it feels like you've died.
I did actually. I felt more than numb. It was
There's
a
that sort of
horrible,
existential emptiness, isn't there?
yes. And I've always been one of those people, sort of a bit of a JFDI,
Keep going.
just keep going. And if you put enough effort into it, you'll get through it. It's actually our family motto is nihil con labore, nothing without effort. And I've never really sort of thought about that a lot, but it is true of all of us in the family. And so we're worker bees. And I had nothing left inside me. Plus, I was physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted. I was absolutely done.
Because the battling to try and keep the business going had really kind of worn you out. There'd been many battles, it was very intense, the fight. And the thing that I'm really interested in your saying is, with that physical exhaustion, but also grief isn't something that you can battle and push through. It has a kind of natural process of its own. And you need to find a way of supporting yourself to manage the emotional intensity, which is a completely different mindset and way of being than just JFDI, isn't it? You need
It,
some JFDI, I think, actually. But
yeah, it's so true. And I remember you were fantastic with me because I got impatient at times. It's like, I want to feel like myself again. I want to get going and get into a new chapter. I don't know what that chapter is, but I want to at least want to be there. And yet I was wading through molasses. And it was such a foreign feeling for me because I've just always been, yes, JFDI, whether that's work or fitness. And I suppose I'd had it in a tiny, tiny way when I've been in a sort of nasty skiing accident and had to deal with my body just not functioning as I like it to function
mm,
and having to give it that time. And it's slightly ironic because a few weeks ago I've hurt my knee again, and it really gives me a kick in the guts because it reminds me of how much my physicality is so important to me. And as we get older, we know that to a degree, we lose that. And it's quite a wake up call to just be reminded that we won't always have the strength and the physical power to power on through.
yeah. And there is a real link between physical strength and mental strength. And I think accidents like the one you're talking about reminds us of our mortality and reminds us that we're more frail than probably we would choose to feel. You said I was helpful, and I'm not going to ask you about that, but what do you know for other people listening that supported you? What enabled you to deal with the total exhaustion, the numbness, the not feeling like sort of feeling, who am I now? What am I going to do? That awful kind of liminal limbo.
Firstly, I think for me, I knew that I wanted another dog in my life, and I knew I needed a break after Lola, who was just this dream dog. And I knew the business was coming to an end and going into administration and all of that. So painful. But I just also knew I needed joy in my life too. And animals have always brought me great joy. And so I chose a puppy. And the irony of this is I went to collect her, and this little bundle, and she came from Scotland actually, and I'd agreed with the breeder that I'd meet at sort of Lancaster service station or whatever. And I drove up, and there was this little black, tiny, tiny little creature with a pink collar on, sitting next to the breeder. And I just felt this sort of rush of emotion. And anyhow, I picked her up. I went to my mother's for lunch before driving all the way back down to the New Forest. So we had this lovely, and my other brother was over from Albania because we all knew that Charlie was sort of on his way out. And we had this lovely, joyful lunch together. And I got back to the New Forest, so I had a hell of a drive. And the phone went at 5 a.m. the next morning, and Charlie had gone. And we knew it was coming and all the rest of it. But I had this little creature that had to be picked up and let out first thing in the morning, and was just such a bundle of joy. And she kept me going in a way because, and that sounds a bit silly, but they're so reliant on you. It's like a child, you've got to pick them up, put them out, train them, get them outside every 2 hours. Otherwise, you're just never going to house train them, and feed them, all of that. And so this little bundle of joy got me out into nature, forced me out of the house so many times a day. And nature has always been incredibly special to me and incredibly healing and magical and a privilege to be in.
And sort of centers you. Do you remind me of James Middleton? We interviewed him a few months ago, and his dog Ella, I mean, he became suicidal and was on the verge of taking his own life when he saw Ella's face looking at him. And so she really saved his life and then helped pull him through.
Wow.
So when you say it's silly, I think that there is a kind of cultural sort of dismissal of how significant the animals are in our life, but actually we know it from research that they can be the most important person in a family. A dog can be the being, if you like, rather than a person, that everyone in the family loves when they kind of hate each other. You know, it could be the cohesive glue. And I think what you're saying is the same. That opening your heart when your heart was sort of dying inside, like the falling in love the day before, at the moment that your brother died, and that the synchronicity of it somehow feels a little bit spiritual, a little bit like it was meant to be.
It felt very spiritual, I have to say. It really did. And I'll never forget, we've got a lovely, lovely gardener and down in the New Forest, and she was a bit of a white witch, but she was wonderful. And she took one look at Luna and she said, "This one was sent to make you laugh." And do you know what she has? She's less of a soulmate than Lola was, but my God, she's just makes us laugh on a daily, hourly basis. You know, just silly faces, silly behavior, just total joy. And I will never forget her as a tiny puppy. And, you know, you'd call her and she would just run at you expecting to be caught. And it just does fill your heart.
Yeah. So in a way, it's love that enabled you to survive, wasn't it? The love of Lena and her kind of unconditional love for you. I guess the thing about when you call her and she runs towards you, there's a spontaneity and a kind of freedom and lack of judgment that often in grief we get so stuck in ourselves, we get stuck in the ruminating, stuck in the guilt, stuck in the what ifs. And there's a kind of free flow with an animal that can take you out of that.
That is so true. And as you said earlier, unless you have been through it, and everyone's grief is different, but unless you've been through it, it's so hard for someone else to understand. And I felt so bad for Hugh at the time because he'd been with
Your
me on this
partner.
my partner of many, many, many years, and he'd been with me on this whole administration journey. He'd been amazing. He'd been absolutely right by my side.
Can I pause you and just say, what was that administration journey of business ending? I don't think is often recognized as a real loss. What were the kind of worst aspects of it inside you? What were the emotions that were so hard to deal with?
Well, but I just want to say about a little bit about the business side too, because I had a private equity backing, and they basically said when I came back from compassionate leave, because I'd taken a few weeks off previously just so that I could spend time with my mother and my brother. And I came back from that and they basically said, "You're the only director in the trading company. We are not going to fund this business anymore, so you have to put it into administration." Well, I was a creative director. I was not a managing director, a CEO, or any of that. So I was so unbelievably out of my depth. I was going through the trauma of trying to be the adult in the room with my family. And that's no disrespect to my mother or sister-in-law or, you know, but I was the one that was really trying to hold the family not together because we were very together, but yes, I was for everyone. So I literally came off that call, had to call the friendly administrator, so he was called by the private equity company, and get an A to Z of how to do this. And over the following 5 months, I had to steer this business towards administration with guidance from an administrator, but a lot of guidance from Hugh, because every night I had to write up director's notes as to what the day had looked like, who I'd spoken to, what, all of that. I was
Sounds awful.
so out of my depth.
So
I would wake up
frightening.
every morning with a knot in my stomach,
Yeah.
just wanting the day to be over, wishing the whole process away.
It's like a slow death.
It was like a slow death, and yet my brother was dying slowly.
Yeah.
It was just horrible.
Horrendous.
I can still remember that
feeling,
gut-wrenching
the
feeling,
weight.
the weight. Yeah, it was just horrible. And so that was the business side of it.
I imagine there's still a sense of failure or fury or...
Honestly, the emotion was total exhaustion.
Yeah. Defeated.
Yeah, just like, okay, this is what's happening. And just survival, actually, getting through this quite complex legal process. And it was so foreign to me, and wanting to do it really well for my team, for the suppliers, for everyone I had worked with for so many years. That was brutal.
Sounds so brutal.
And yet I had this whole other brutality that I was dealing with of losing a sibling.
Yeah. So painful, Amanda. Is this a silly question? Did clothes and style, did you use them as comfort, as support, as stabilizers in the way that people listening can? Because I have some clients who refuse not to wear black, or they'll only wear miserable clothes. Other people want to kind of put on a jacket of color so that it can give them a little glimpse of joy. How did you use clothes and style?
That's an interesting one. I wore a lot of cashmere.
Cozy.
Every day I wore cashmere. I do remember thinking, right, every day we will all work from home at that time. And I thought every day I got up in the morning, I got some exercise, put my game face on, put some makeup on.
Yeah.
Yes, and dressed appropriately for being cozy, work from home. Shh, sorry, I've got a dog behind me now.
Luna. That's
joining
nice.
the conversation.
Let's meet Luna. Let's meet Luna.
Luna, come on. Can you see her?
Yes, I can. Hello, Luna.
Hey, Luna. She's got her Swiss scarves on.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. You're not going out yet. No, go on. So, yes, it was about using clothes to cocoon me, actually.
Yeah.
To empower me, to put an armor, a softness around me. I certainly didn't want anything, not that I ever do, but nothing crunchy or hard. I wanted to feel
soft.
Yes.
It's interesting that the sort of warmth, the
hug of cashmere.
Yes, that's a lovely way of describing it. A hug of cashmere is comforting, and there's a sense of safety with that. And I think that's when that fear of the unknown, of your brother dying, of the business, the hug of cashmere is oxytocin of cashmere, which is the kind of bonding hug, which is interesting. And have you changed what you wear now that you were kind of 3 years down the line? Do you show yourself differently?
No, not really, because I think I worked out fairly early on who I was stylistically, my style DNA.
What is your style DNA?
I always talk about it as being clean, glam, and sportif. So it's the sort of mixture. I always talk about 3 words that define us. So I think the liberation is that I can wear whatever I want to wear now. I don't have to be in the latest collection because that's what I would sell off my back, because people would see me in it and want that black jacket or whatever it was. And actually now I'm loving being able to wear something I designed 20 years ago, because I don't have to have it in stock and be able to sell it. And I can re-enjoy the beauty of that garment, and also likewise discover who's doing wonderful things on the high street. And it's really lovely to be able to put my designer eye onto that and say, this is really good, and this is why I think it's really good, and actually this is why I'm buying it.
Isn't that great? Were you mid-50s in this big transition with your brother and the business? And there
Yeah.
may be people listening who have a divorce, or they have to leave their job, or their business has gone under. How did you find your new identity? What were the things that helped you?
Firstly, I've never been big on thinking about my age. I'm not in denial. I have no issue with it. But in my head, I'm somewhere in my late 30s. And I plan to remain there for quite a while. So in
So you
terms
dress
of,
like you're in your 30s. So when, that mutton dressed as lamb thing, do you think that's rubbish?
I think it's complete rubbish. I think we should dress in what pleases us. I don't really want to show my arms as much as I did when I was in my 30s. And that's fine. That pleases me to be in long sleeved tops. So it's less about being in denial of what my body looks like, but it's more about pleasing myself. I think if we constantly think, I'm 60, I'm 60, I'm 60, we sort of become it. And I think our parents' generation very much did. And it was very much, my father retired when he was, whatever it was, 62. And he went into this whole retirement chapter. And I think he got old before his
The research
years.
shows that, is that
Yeah.
you need
And
another, even if it's volunteering, that you need another purpose when you retire.
yes. And so I think, it's about working out your new identity, that liminal space, which I know at times I struggled with when you and I had sessions, because I was sort of in a hurry to get on to this next phase. And then it is the joy, the sheer joy that comes from realizing, yes, I've had those amazing 30 years. I'm really proud of that. But actually, there's a whole other chapter, or hopefully chapters, out there for me. And yes, it was tough, and it was really bloody scary. And I really had my toes close to the fire when I said, okay, I'm going to do a podcast. And then sort of day for first recording came around. And stupidly, it was actually the day of that first recording was it was the first anniversary of Charlie's death.
Oh my God, Amanda, you had not been listening to me. I mean, I never would have said you could do. I mean, that would be a sensible thing to do.
I can do this. I can do this. I can do. And then on the morning, I thought, shit, this is huge. And fortunately, my first recording was with the wonderful Trini Woodall, and I think she could sense that I was trying to be a proper professional, but she really helped me through that recording.
She
And
pulled
I
you
will
through. Yeah.
thank her forever for that. And it was an unspoken, but she was
She read you.
phenomenal. She read me, and she was fantastic. And I think during that transition time, it was the first time in my life I had felt anxiety. And that was such a foreign feeling for me. And I don't know whether that was slightly hormonal too, as well as just everything that I was dealing with. But that was a feeling of being so out of control, that sort of anxious about silly shit, and thinking, God, who's that woman? That's not me. I can deal with this, but oh, no, I can't. This is scary. Waking up in the morning thinking, shit, another scary day ahead. And then just gently getting out into nature, walking, processing what I had to do that day, writing lists of what I had to do that day, ticking things off as I went through it, and then giving myself a little bit of a pat on the back at lunchtime, at the end of the day. Because working in isolation pretty much on your own, yes, I had a sort of publicist on the side and someone who was going to help me with the social media side of things, but you're on your own. And suddenly it's like tech. Oh my God, I don't know how to do that. But then you learn and then you feel so good.
It's the small wins. I think if I kind of whittle down what you're saying is that it's allowing yourself to feel the pain and the anxiety and the not knowing and the fear, and also having little moments of trying something out and a small win, and that those small wins grow when you dare to sort of, like with the podcast, dare to do it.
Yeah. You put that so much better than I did, so much quicker.
Well, you'd done all the heavy lifting and saying it in the first place. So where are you now? What are you taking from the past, and where are you now?
Oh, well, interesting one, because I have just signed with Penguin to do
Good for you.
a style DNA book. So I am currently isolating myself in Switzerland, trying to get some of that down. And it's actually a beautiful, cathartic process, because I'm really taking myself on my style DNA journey, my business journey. And I mean, I'm literally scratching the surface of it. And in between releasing podcasts every week and writing up all of that, there's a lot on, and recording Friday Night Fashion and all of that. So I'm slightly commuting between the two. But as I mentioned earlier, I hurt my knee about 6 weeks ago in a couple of sort of tricky falls skiing, which I love. And
I know about fall skiing. It's fucking disaster from my point of view.
I know. And I've had 4 big skiing accidents over the last 18 years.
I don't know how you've gone back to skiing. I mean, I will never ski again. I don't know how you've gone back after a big accident.
I'll tell you how, because it's interesting, because it's more, and I work very hard on my rehab and all of that, but your head holds you back. And I decided that I was going to try some hypnotherapy to see if I could get my subconscious to trust my body. And it was hugely, hugely helpful. Hugely helpful. We love to do a lot of ski touring, which means, we go off backcountry and climb mountains and then take skins off the bottom of our skis sort of on a precipice or whatever before skiing down. And I think it was hormones and I started to get a little bit of vertigo. And I went, do you know what? I'm going to have some hypnotherapy on this vertigo and see if I can crack it, because, I'd be happy climbing, and then I'd be on the top and thinking, oh my God, I'm just freeze. And I had a hypnotherapy session on vertigo, just one, interestingly. And I remember 2 weeks later, we were out in the backcountry, and I was at the top of this sort of cliff, really. And it dropped down virtually vertically, both sides. And I was just stripping off my skins and thinking, this is fine. I can do this. And I wasn't scared. It was extraordinary. So yes, so that's how do I get back out there, because I love it and I love being in nature and I love the physicality of it, but I've had to work on my head to get me back out there. But this recent knee issue, it's funny, it set me back emotionally too. And all of my previous accidents, Charlie was right around. He was the top musculoskeletal radiologist in the country. And so ring Charlie, say, okay, it's my ankle this time. Oh, okay, you need to see so-and-so, so-and-so. He's the absolute best. I'll be there when you have your MRI. I'll read it, all of that. And then it's like, where is Charlie? And it's not just that I miss him for that. That sounds so shallow. It's not, but it's just a level of like, bam, he's not here. And I know my mother her that something was going on with her the other day, and she said, "Oh, it's times like now I really miss Charlie, because it's like, what do we do here?" So I spoke to one of Charlie's best friends who operated on both of my knees, and he sort of ran me through it. And actually, I'm going to go and see him next week, and he gave the most fabulous eulogy at Charlie's funeral. And so I feel it was good to speak to him, because it reminded me that I'm still in this medical family, and there's still a lot of love for Charlie and a lot of protection for his family. I'm feeling not so much grief, but it's almost put me into a slightly numb state. And I can't, and I would love to understand that, because is it because it's brought back the grief again? Is this part of the grieving process? Or am I just putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 44?
So if you move your attention internally and sort of take a breath, move your attention around your body until you find the place that you feel numb. And
It's my heart.
It's in your heart. And is there a color? Is there a shape?
No, I can't say there is, but maybe that's
Blank. No,
because
that's fine.
we're all
That's
plugged
fine.
into technology. And
No, just stay. There isn't a wrong or right answer. So as you breathe into your heart, what are you aware of? What are the sensations you're aware of?
I can sense blue.
Blue.
Mm.
Anything else?
Just an aching.
An aching. So, I mean, for me, what comes out with that is a kind of freeze of the blue and this sort of ache of the wound.
Interesting.
And so as you breathe into it, if the ache and the blue could speak, are there any words or is there a sound that comes with it?
No, I think it's just a deep sadness, actually.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah. So when you connect with it, you can really feel the deep sadness that is connected to Charlie as well as your own fragility, I guess.
Yeah. And maybe we do grieve in phases. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, a new loss brings back a previous loss. So stay with that feeling. What's happening now? What are you aware of now? Take a breath.
I immediately want to go out and be in nature.
Yeah. So that's where your healing sort of force is in you.
It's funny. I was on my dog walk yesterday lunchtime, and I was at my sort of traditional turning point out here in the mountains, and I looked up, and I was being looked down on by a lone chamois, and I've got goosebumps talking about it. It was so magical. It was like nature saying, "You're not alone." And I know I'm not alone. I have a wonderful, partner. I've got a wonderful family, but it was just sort of, and more the universe.
It feels like a spiritual experience in a
Yes,
way.
it really was, actually. And the chamois, who are very, very shy creatures normally, it was very bold, and it really eyeballed me, and it allowed me to take lots of pictures of it. And that was really, really magical, actually.
Yeah, feels like a sort of blessing.
Yeah, that's how I see it.
So I guess the information that we've just got now is that on top you feel numb, but when you allow yourself to move into the sensation, you feel very deep sadness that you kind of need to express. But also what happens within you is that you want to move your body, you want to be in nature, and you also want to shift. It's quite hard to stay still with it.
Very true.
And movement, there's a therapy called somatic experiencing, and if we kind of listen to the sensations in our body and allow them to kind of be expressed. And then you move your body in relation to what feels expressed. So some people, it might be kind of rocking backwards and forwards. Another person, it might be moving their arms or putting their hand on their chest. So what's the physical sensation that's instinctive to you now?
Oh, I want to be back out on my skis in that just glorious, glorious nature. But yes, it's just go and take a brisk walk uphill and get that gorgeous fresh air into my lungs, and yes, get the endorphins going.
And I guess feeling that there's an empowerment in movement, whereas if you stay with the sadness, you feel a bit disempowered, I guess.
Yes, and stuck. And, I'm going through this creative process of writing, and I've always found that movement inspires me, whether that's a long swim or a long walk or climbing a mountain. I always had real clarity of ideas that come with that.
Well, we know from research that when you flex your body, it flexes your mind. When you move your body, it moves your mind. The
Yeah,
two, they work together. There's a dance between movement and how we think and what we think and
yeah,
processing. So
yeah.
you're kind of instinctively doing that.
And actually, on that word instinct, I think, in terms of what we were talking about earlier, sort of how do you progress forward? I think now more than ever in my life, I am listening to my gut, and it is so powerful. And we know so much. And I don't know whether it's particularly as women, maybe it's not, but I think that is the wonderful part of this chapter is the knowledge that we have gathered over the years and combined with the ability to listen to our gut is incredibly freeing, and it's a wonderful thing to be able to share.
Yeah. I think that I really understand that sort of tuning in and allowing our kind of wisdom from our experiences and our sort of sensory instinct to kind of work together and to find what emerges. So as we're coming to the end, lovely Amanda, if other people are going through transitions, so you'd say move your body, be in nature, listen to your gut, JFDI.
JFDI, and know that there are fabulous new chapters out there
So
for
have
you.
hope.
Really have hope. And actually, I have discovered such joy, which I just, if you'd asked me this 4 years ago, I couldn't imagine life beyond Amanda Wakeley, what that would look like, but if you give yourself that liminal space,
The fertile void. Yeah.
the fertile void, to let it come to you and realize how much we know as women who are not 20 and 30 anymore, and that life is such a wonderful adventure. And we've got this knowledge that we've built up, and just be brave. What's the worst that can happen?
Have
It
courage.
doesn't it
Dare.
doesn't work. Have courage, just because it's a very exciting journey. Look at you. You've become a podcaster you became an author from being a therapist because you had this amazing knowledge and experience, and you want to share it.
Yeah.
And it's the sharing that's very joyful, actually, too. There's something in that sort of old pagan way of, I don't want to say being an elder, but in a way, and the joy of sharing that knowledge that I'm loving.
I think that's a wonderful place to stop. Sharing your wisdom and your knowledge while also recognizing your own vulnerability and allowing for both feels really significant. So thank you so much, Amanda.
And being brave enough to fail.
Yeah. To dare to fail.
Dare to fail.
Yeah.
And we learn so much from that. And it's not a disgrace. It's a disgrace in a way not to make the most of this unbelievable gift of a life that we have. And, that Charlie doesn't have. And so for me, my tribute to him is make the most of every fucking day on this planet because it's really special.
Yeah. And I can see you welling up as you say that.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So that is a really special place to end, in kind of acknowledging that the love for your brother and the recognition of his death, that he doesn't have this life, and so you want to kick the shit out of the life that you've got.
I love that, Julia. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily and Sophie, lovely to see you and talk about Amanda Wakeley and her conversation. A lot, actually, listening back to it came up for me, which I'll tell you. So, but tell me what came up for you.
It was such a lovely conversation to listen to. It was also lovely to hear how much you'd helped her mum. Like she mentioned a lot of times, like things that have, like just sort of little nuggets that she'd got from you that had really transformed how she framed things or how she thought about herself. And that was like a really nice thing to hear. And that sort of little exercise you did with her at the end around sort of tuning into her body. And it did make me think there's some things that you can do that are incredibly helpful, that are very quick and really simple, like just sort of focusing on, okay, I have this like uncomfortable bodily sensation. What is it? Like, what size is it? What texture is it? What sound would it make? And actually just doing something really basic like that can sometimes get underneath whatever kind of defense it is that's sort of blocking you from actually feeling it.
And for people listening, this comes from Eugene Gendlin's Felt Sense Focusing, which we'll put a link to. And I used it this week. I'm speaking this week at a conference that I'm finding very, very scary. And I couldn't sleep. It was quite funny. I used every kind of meditation, journaling, writing with my left hand that Sophie told me to do, listening to people online telling me how to sleep and breathe. And I did absolutely effing everything, and nothing worked. And so I took a pill.
Until
That's right. I just thought, thank God for drugs. But the thing that helped a couple of days later, when I was literally in such an anxious state, was going in, and I saw, it's just like a orange furious emoji of a scared, furious, like 5-year-old who was just screaming, like really kicking off. And once I access that, I feel completely different. So, and it took me like 10 minutes.
But it took you 10 minutes plus however many days it
Yes, it drove me nuts and kept me awake and stopped me concentrating. And I mean, the only reason I'm saying it is for however much therapy one's had, I think there are things that can push your buttons.
Yeah, always.
And I think also that it took you 10 minutes, but probably that's because you have a practice over time of getting to know what your body is saying. And I think there is a language to be learned for each of us about our own bodies, isn't it? About, we tend to have patterns of holding in certain places. And, I think just noting the thing for yourself where you feel things and in your body when you feel certain emotions, we don't feel things in our head. We feel them in our body.
No, and yeah, I think and the other helpful thing to do is like when a feeling is familiar, sometimes it's helpful to sort of go back in time and be like, when can I first feel it?
Remember
I had
feeling
this.
that.
Yes, like I had this the other day when my husband and I had a discussion, not quite a fight, but sort of borderline fight. Heated discussion. And then he still had something else to do, and I was really tired, so I went up to bed and I went to brush my teeth. And I just remember I was like standing in the bathroom and I felt so abandoned, and he hadn't abandoned me at all. He'd just like gone off to like, I don't know, take the dog out or whatever it was. And I was like, what? Like, how do I feel like he's literally sort of like just left me?
Hanging.
We've actually like had this fight, we've resolved it, we're kind of okay. And then I was like, oh no, I know this feeling. I know this. This is an old feeling. Like it's And somehow just knowing that this feeling was to do with really like something else, and for whatever reason this discussion had sort of activated it, was really helpful, because I was like, oh no, I know this. I know this bit. And
This is this horrible old friend of abandonment feeling.
It's like, and then I could just sort of soothe myself and also sort of put it in the right place, so that then I didn't actually blame him for abandoning me by taking the dog out. And I could be like, oh no, yeah. So it could just
it's
sort of
that
take
thing of stepping back. The minute you step back and you name it, something shifts. It's when you allow it to overtake you, then you act out and you're in big trouble.
I remember.
And get abandoned as well. He would then abandon you, like, what the fuck? What are you doing?
Yeah. Crazy lady.
I remember reading a piece of research that showed that when you're in a fight, if you walk away from each other from 15 to 20 minutes, which is the length of time it takes for adrenaline to leave your body, then you could come back and finish your fight a lot faster. Just that thing of calming down and regaining your frontal lobe activation and sort of processing again rather than in a reactive state is quite
good knowledge, Safe. I did not know that. So we've got a lot to talk about. Grief, which I think is very under talked about. Sibling death, which again is very under talked about. And actually I want to talk about the psychology of star, which I also think isn't discussed enough.
Yeah, same. I want to talk about all those things, but where to start?
I have to say that moment of talking about sibling death, it definitely for me brings up like a sick feeling inside when I think about losing any of you. Like, for me, my sisters and my brother are some of the most important, absolutely crucial people in my life. And it would be devastating.
Yes. And I think you're so
you
right.
Get teary, I can see you teary, Soph, just even thinking about it.
Yeah. But I think the sibling relationship, obviously, each sibling has their own experience. But I suppose when it works, when you're sort of in a functional enough sibling relationship, as adults, they're like the only people who can really understand your childhood and where you've come from. And that's such a sort of formative thing. I read this very lovely article in The Guardian a couple of months ago by a writer whose sister died. And also one of the things that he said was that she was like the keeper of their memories. Like she was better at remembering, do you remember when like you learned about the birds and the bees at camp when you were 10? Like she remembered these little moments, those little nuggets. And so when she died, and she died quite suddenly, he felt like, oh, I've lost her, but I've also lost
the keeper of the memories.
I've also lost my tie to all these things that happened to me as a child, because that was the job that she sort of did. And there are so many books on death and so many websites supporting people who've been bereaved, but there isn't really any like exclusively like sibling loss charities or websites. I mean, that I know of.
There are a few, but much less. Much less.
Yeah. So maybe the ones that there are, Mum, you can put links.
Oh, yeah. I think it's called Siblings UK, but I'll look it up.
Yeah, and you also lose your family system. So you lose everything between you and that sibling. And for me, at least, I know each of us have quite different relationships with each sibling. Okay, it's not like it's all the same. But then also your family structure, changes, how everyone relates to and just shifts, because you were a unit that functioned in a particular way, and it throws everything off, and every family occasion and every Christmas and all those quote unquote family times that are so difficult if there has been any kind of tragedy in the family. So there are lots of layers to it.
And also I think the ongoingness of it, like when she hurt her knee, and normally she would call her brother, and that there is a very nice bond with that community through him. But it's like her mum too, that like the role, like his role was the medical role, like the keeper of the memory role. And every time that hits you, that will hit you all your life, maybe with less or more intensity. But I think we so forget how the ongoingness of grief affects us in different ways at different times.
Yeah, and I think one of the powerful things about an interview like Amanda's is that, on the pod, we have lots of different voices, don't we? We have these well-known people and we have unknown voices, and they all bring something different, and they can be quite, I think that's really powerful to have quite large differences between our guests, therefore. Some that can come with a lot of privilege, a lot of status if they're well known or famous or wealth. And then people who've come from very ordinary, normal backgrounds. And classes are really difficult things to talk about. It's often uncomfortable and painful for lots of people. And we can get very, and understandably so, deep into the differences between class. But I think there's also a lovely thing of when there are these things that are just human, right? That part of human
Universal.
experience and universal. And grief is one of those. And Amanda's experience of loss of her brother is that kind of so relatable to the way that it doesn't matter what your background is or what your experience is, your world can be thrown in complete disarray and disorientation and lostness when someone you love dies.
Doesn't protect you from pain.
No.
I think that's really helpful. Can we talk about the psychology of clothes?
I do think one of the reasons it's not talked about so much because it's thought of as very female.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's frivolous, it's like frippery or
Dismissed.
yeah. It's not considered serious.
Yeah, good point.
There are lots of things I think about, kind of looks and clothes, and that is not at all frippery or shallow, because I think when we step out of our house and out into the world, working world, or kind of connecting social world, or for a family celebration, finding what you wear and how your hair is and your makeup and what you look like really can boost you and give you confidence, or can knock you for six and you can barely walk into the room. I think it really can help you once you find what's useful for you and how you do it.
No, I think it's a huge part of identity, isn't it? Of like what you choose to put on your body, how you choose to present to the world. And I have always been a lover of what I call my ugly clothes.
Yes.
Which is, I really love wearing when I'm just at home with just the people that I really love who know me really well. I love nothing more than like finding
The ugliest
clothes I possibly can.
I totally agree.
And I don't know what that says about me, but it's something to do with like I
Not
just feel
having
free.
to put on a show. Yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like you don't care what I look like. You love me anyway. I can wear like the ugliest t-shirt, the ugliest strappy bottoms, and I'm very comfortable and I'm very happy. I don't know if I'm unique in that, but no, you don't. You always look. Do you?
I'd say Em embraces it quite a lot more than you, Mum. I'd say Em is particularly good.
You don't wear a sort of 1980s tie-dye shirt.
In Scotland last weekend, I wore 1980s clothes. Corduroy bell bottoms and an old cardi from French Connection from 1983.
I'm not sure you look quite like the same panache.
No.
I don't think you do.
I think there's an intention of yours which is choosing to be ugly, whereas I think mine is choosing to be cozy. Yeah.
Yes.
But it's a really good point. I love that.
I do enjoy clothes and things like that, but I also find it a bit of a minefield, because the way that, eating healthily or exercising is a minefield for me. It feels like this landscape where there's these like big pitfalls to fall into, where you actually end up feeling worse about yourself rather than better. Like how you're supposed to look, how as a woman, you're supposed to be, what your body shape, size, being cool, whatever. It's not a straightforward landscape, or at least not to my mind as a woman, of how I really liked her phrase, what pleases you, like putting on what pleases
I like that.
you. And that's like, for me, that'd be like, oh yeah, that's like a channel I can walk down where I can engage with this stuff.
That's a portal. Like, is this pleasing me?
Yeah, rather than getting hooked into like what other people think, or stuff that then I feel like throws me off track.
What pleases them?
Or like this idea, or like sometimes I just don't like if you're thinking about like what looks good on me. I don't really. Sometimes I try something on. I just look at myself and I'm like, no,
I really don't know.
Yeah.
I agree.
But you're very decisive. You might not know, but you choose
quickly.
Quickly, because I'm impatient. I'm impatient. I mean, I loathe trying on clothes. I
Me too.
I think that's universal in our family.
A changing room is one of my worst places in the world.
Ugh.
I loathe it. The whole getting undressed, dressed, looking in the mirror, the heat, I really, really hate it. But if I find, so I have, like this jacket I'm wearing today is like 25 years old. I think I look good in this jacket. So when I was thinking about my style DNA, I was thinking I like classic and I like simple, is it? I think, with a bit of a colour. So when I was thinking about my style DNA, I was thinking I want a little flash of colour, I want classic, and I want simple, I think. And then that's quite a healthy portal too. So what pleases me is that I think that matches how I want to feel on the inside, on the outside.
Yeah. Yes, I don't think I know my style DNA, but I do know that, like, as my body has changed through time, finding things that I feel good in for whatever reason makes a big difference about how I feel about myself.
And confidence,
like
self-esteem.
Yes. I was also thinking about, I just got glasses recently.
I know, look at you both.
I know. And I've always wanted glasses since I was
I
like
remember.
a really small child. So I, this is a sort of family law story.
Yes.
But I faked the eye test when I was about 7 or 8 because I was so desperate to have glasses that I was like, JLS, yeah. But obviously I did a terrible job at faking it because he was like, yeah, no, you don't need glasses.
No,
Do you remember
said
what he
to you, all I
actually
can
said?
see,
All
all
you've got
I
in your
can see
eye.
is mischief in your eyes.
The line actually is, Mum, there's nothing but mischief in those eyes.
Yes, and I was so upset that I remember lying on your bed, Mum, like just crying that I didn't get glasses. And now, age 41, I finally got glasses. And you know, I love them. I think they make me just look more intelligent. I think people will look at me and be like, "Oh, she must be clever." So actually, I was right. I did think I thought that I would feel good in glasses, and I do.
You do. You look beautiful. I think my message from this is that clothes is a serious business that shouldn't be treated as frippery and silly.
Yes, I mean, I think what we haven't talked about, what is really important, is about her business and how huge that is to her identity and to many, many, many people's identity. And I actually felt anxious when she was talking about like having to manage putting that into administration and not knowing what she was doing and trying to figure it out. Like I had like a sort of physical reaction of like, oh my gosh, this sounds
so frightening.
So frightening. And that change is loss, and it's so much harder when you're not in control. It wasn't like her choice for this to happen.
Done to her.
That just sort of name that.
Acknowledge
the
that.
difficulty
What you call a living loss, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is, yeah. And maybe we should talk about that more and think about that more, that it is a real grief. And when it isn't acknowledged, I think that intensifies the grief, because it does throw you in the same way as grief does into an alien place within yourself, like the map in your mind. I don't know who I am without this business. The map in my mind, I don't know how to do this. There's so much shame. There's so much judgment. It's all who I've been for the last 25 years. So that's an enormous amount of loss that I think culturally we really do not acknowledge.
No, and I think it's a loss even when it is a choice, like that you've chosen to stop doing whatever it is that you're doing. But obviously just an easier one.
So thank you very, very much, Amanda. It's lovely to connect with you and your warmth and your openness and your lovely dog. Dogs come up so often in our pod, don't they? And nature. Oh my God, the spiritual moment. That has happened with clients quite often. So anyhow, it was really lovely, and I hope everybody enjoys it and gets something from it. So thank you, Amanda. Bye.